everyone, and welcome to Bourbon Bites. I'm Clifton, and thank you for tuning in to another Thursday night live stream. Today's going to be really special. It's going to be a first for the channel, which is actually an Israeli whiskey. I venture outside of bourbon every now and then, and I'm learning to like world whiskeys in general. So as soon as I heard about Milk and Honey, I had to buy it and try it out. Fortunately, I had some connections over there through ImpEx Beverages, and we have some really special guests for you guys tonight. So I see a few people hanging out in the chat. Thank y'all for pre-gaming a bit. I should have been pre-gaming, but good to see all of y'all here. I did ask Patreon for some questions that we're going to mention later in the show for these guys. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guests. Please welcome from Milk and Honey Whiskey, Tal, and from ImpEx Beverages, Joshua Hatton. What's up, guys?
Hello there.
Good to have you on. And I mentioned this earlier, but Tal is joining us live from Israel right now, where it's, I believe, 4 a.m.
No, it's 5 a.m.
5 a.m. Okay, a little better, but also I'm super appreciative for you to come on and be a part of this, because I know a lot of the people here in the chat are not that familiar with M&H, and I think this is going to be kind of a really cool intro to a world whiskey they may not have tried before. So I guess if you guys could just tell these guys a little bit about yourself and how you, I guess, got into what you're doing.
Joshua, you start. I'm still warming up.
Okay.
Do you have your pint of Guinness at the ready?
There we go.
Good. That's a small pint. Either that or your hands have just gotten very large. So Joshua Hatton with ImpEx Beverages, and I'm the National Sales Director with the import company. And we started many years back importing mostly Scotch whiskeys like Isle of Skye Blend. That was the first brand that we started with. And then distilleries like Kilchoman jumped on, and we've got Glenallachie, for Scotch whiskeys, and Port Ascaig. And then we started looking at world whiskeys. So we've got Penderyn on board as well. And now our good friends here at M&H Distillery. It's, for us as importers, we focus on, I wouldn't say smaller brands, but brands that are independent and are of the same mind as us, that are just looking to make great product and put it in front of people with passion. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So from my side, I think I started, around almost 30 years ago in the industry. First of all, as a little bit as a bartender. Tel Aviv is actually, it's a very rough night tonight in Tel Aviv. There was a terrorist act in one of the bars. Was shooting in a bar.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, they're still looking for the terrorist. Usually it ends much quicker here. But so I started off as a bartender, and then learned a little bit of winemaking, but really fell in love with the harder stuff. So I started working in, I think it was in one of the big companies. It was Pernod Ricard, and then Diageo for a long time. And then, of course, just met a few crazy guys that they actually blame me for getting them to fall in love with whiskey. and what happens with few guys that sit together with few bottles of whiskey, usually it ends up in, let's open the best bar in the world. So this time it was, let's open a distillery in Tel Aviv, which is even crazier than opening the best bar in the world. So I think that it started off from there. So I'm 50 years old, living in just outside Tel Aviv, and working in the M&H Distillery.
That's awesome. So you've been with the company since it started?
Yeah, I've been in the company since it started. I was off for like two or 3 years, and then came back. But I was there with the first meeting ever.
That's awesome. So for those of you who don't know, Milk and Honey, M&H is short for Milk and Honey. They were actually the very first whiskey distillery in all of Israel. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It's the first and the biggest.
Wow. So what was the reasoning? I mean, other than, drinking a few bottles with some friends, like what, beyond being the first, like what drove you to really, what did you feel was missing in the whiskey market?
So I think that we actually saw a little bit of the craft movement around the world, that you don't have to be a bourbon or a Scotch or an Irish whiskey, and we saw the guys from Penderyn, for example, from Wales, and first of all, for Israelis, you just have to say to an Israeli, if you want an Israeli to do something, just tell him he can't. And we'll try to do that. And this is Gal, the owner, the founder, and the guy behind it, and now is the current CEO. He's like that. He wanted to be a pioneer, so he said, "All right, I'm brewing beer at home. Let's do distillation, and let's do it in much bigger scale. But yeah, let's do it. Let's be a pioneer. Let's be the first one, and of course, why not? We can do that." And then we were trying to look at what is different in Israel, what is different for us, and try to get our DNA.
Yeah, so in terms of having product on the market, I know it's relatively new to the US. Were there other releases before you guys entered the US market?
So it was actually, it was hand by hand, it was step by step, because we just started, this meeting that I was talking about was in 2012, but we actually started constructions in Tel Aviv 2014. And just a little bit before that, the end of 2014, Tomer, the head distiller, together with the late Dr. Jim Swan, that was our first consultant and master distiller, actually the guy behind Kavalan, Amrut, Kilchoman, Penderin.
Wow.
You have some more in the portfolio, Joshua. I think it's Golden Corollas as well.
Yeah, Golden Corollas. Yep.
Yeah, and
Ardent American a little bit as well. Yeah.
Spirit of Yorkshire, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was a busy guy. So yeah, when he came here, and the first distillation, first cask ever made was actually released after 3 years. It was at 2017. So we had one whiskey, but then we started distilling at the distillery. So our first products were just a new make or White Dog, and then young single malts, because for us, even after 5 or 6, 10 months in the climate of Israel, the climate of Tel Aviv, just the distillery is 6 minutes walk from the beach of the Mediterranean.
I was going to say,
beach.
I've heard it's very hot and humid there.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why you get, look at Joshua. He was there. So we have very rapid maturation. So we had released some young single malts, first of all, to show our ability of aging, and the second thing was just for cash flow. And then I think that this was the first editions we actually exported, but America came like less than a year after that. I was meeting Joshua in Manhattan, and we had some tastings with the very young stuff. And then you cannot call it a young single malt if it's not a Scotch or a bourbon. If it was just 2 days maybe in oak, you have to call it whiskey. So
Gotcha.
we released Whiskey in Bloom. It was Joshua came up with the name Whiskey in Bloom, which was a 2-year-old single malt.
Gotcha. You know what's funny is when I asked my patrons before the show for any questions, one of the questions was asking about the Whiskey and Bloom series, and they said they'd heard a lot about that one. So you kind of gave us an overview. That was kind of like the first product that you guys put out. And then now you guys have this incredible lineup that we're going to be tasting through here today. I want to get something in my glass. What about you guys? I mean, I know it's 5 a.m., but you don't have to. There you go.
I just finished the coffee, so...
Nice. So this is the classic cask. I guess this is kind of the entry level to the brand, I would say. Can you tell us a little bit about this release and how it came to be?
So yeah, I think that even with the Whiskey and Blooms, we had 2 types. One of them was lightly peated, and the other one was the Whiskey and Bloom, a double cask or something like that. So for us, the house style for the core range is very balanced, and we were looking for a whiskey with the classic. We were looking for a whiskey that will be, first of all, in opening level, something that can just discover our house style using our special cut. We if you can see the still behind me, the line arms goes very deep down, like 45 degrees down, and we cut very high and very short. So the new make is between 80 and 70%. That's it. Not much tails. So you get a very light and very clean spirit. Of course, we lack some of the oils in the tails, but you get the oils back from the line arms because you don't have any reflux. This works great with bourbon casks. because it's fruity. It's a little bit some pastry notes on the new make, and when you age it in a bourbon cask, you get the whole texture and some, the sweetness and the vanilla and everything. We added some around 15% of STR casks. STR cask is a cask that usually was a red wine cask, but it was shaved, toasted, and recharred from inside. That means
wow.
STR, developed
I
originally.
didn't know what that stood for. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So shaved, toasted, and recharred. It was originally developed for Kavalan. So hot climates again, because in the first year it gives you a lot of characteristics. It's just spreads, liquid goes inside the wood more and extracts a lot of color, tannins, fruitiness. So it gives us a bit of seasoning to the blend. So around 80% of ex-bourbon, something like 15-16% of STR cask, and just a drop of new oak, virgin oak, just to connect everything. So Tomer calls it a table whiskey, because if you put it on a table, everyone can enjoy it for the broader probably crowd. I call it a table whiskey because yesterday we had a basketball game, Tel Aviv against Barcelona. We won by 20 points, and it was on the table and it was finished. So it's another table.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Meetups like that. That's awesome. I see a few people in the chat do have some questions. By the way, hi everyone in the chat. I see all of our mods are here. Our bike club members are here. Whiskey Mountains Adriana, she says, so exciting to have such unique guests on and to hear this story. I think so too. I'm so glad that they joined me here tonight. And then she went on to ask, what's the altitude there? I was wondering if there's difference in air pressure and pushing into the barrel. Good question. Yeah.
So it's one question ahead, whether how we can say. So when Jim Swan came here to Israel, and as we said, we talked a little bit about the distilleries he worked with. So he was a busy guy. He didn't take every project. But when he came here and he saw that in 450 kilometers from the northern point to the southern point, you have 5 climate zones, and Tel Aviv is 0 elevations, just on the beach. But then 45 minutes from Tel Aviv, you go up to actually it was higher than I thought. We have a little warehouse at 750 meters above sea level, but Jerusalem is actually 900 meters above sea level. So it's only 45 minutes and you're up on the mountains. And then another hour, you're in minus 428 meters below sea level at the lowest place in the world, at the Dead Sea. And we actually age whiskeys there. So if you talk about air pressure, this is the place for air pressure. Right?
Sounds like it. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So I guess let's go to give this a nose. I see Joshua, you've been smelling it a good bit. What do you like about the nose of this one?
Me?
No, or either of you.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, because I had been nosing it, and I'd also been cheating and taking sips as well.
It's all good.
It's one of the things that really struck me early on about M&H was how full of character their new make was. So fruity, so rich, and so mouth coating. And what I like is all of those characteristics come through even after the bourbon cask maturation, the STR cask maturation. So I'm still getting a lot of that fruity spirit character, and then you've got the bourbon wood that's just kind of supporting it with a bit of vanilla, a bit of spice coming through with that STR cask. And I get this sort of like pear and apple orchard, like sweet apple notes in there. And and it is like Tal said, this is one that I put downstairs, so when people come over, this is the one you open, right? It's the session whiskey.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think like you said earlier, like as a table whiskey, it is very like agreeable, like even for someone that may be new to whiskey. I think on the nose, it's like you get that sweet like vanilla, I think up front. But then on the palate, it's a little less sweet than it smells, but it goes in the fruity direction. And I like that. I like that on the palate. It makes it unique. And
then you add some of the spiciness from the STRs, and I think you can get a little bit of spiciness in almost every whiskey you get from our portfolio. And again, there's another thing, the mouth coating thing, and the upper part of your palate, you get some of the oiliness and the body of this whiskey, and it's great, and it goes with this 46% alcohol. So it's it's non-chill filtration, no chill filtration, no color additives. We don't need that. We have the sun.
Right.
And I think that this is at 46. If you're not used to drinking 46, it's very light. It's very drinkable. I think that one of the first time I actually launched it, and we call ourselves the distillery with the worst timing in the world, because we were actually waiting to launch whiskey, and finally the first cask were over 3 years, and we can call it the single malt whiskey because we followed the Scottish regulations. And we did a launching at the beginning of January 2020 in Amsterdam, and then in Paris, and then the world shut down. So
that's
yeah, we
tough.
had the worst. We had the worst timing. But in one of those launchings, we did, not because I wanted. I love blind tasting, but I don't like it with my stuff because then I'm not sure. And so it was. We had this in Holland, I think. In one of the stores, they asked me, "What do you think about this whiskey style?" I said, maybe if you can compare it to something in Scotland, it's probably a Highland or something like that. And then they went and brought a 10-year-old Glenmorangie and just went to the back. We did a blind tasting. Well, now the Glenmorangie is 40%, so of course you feel that. But then the body on this one was much thicker, much rounder. And then after, even without water, after a few minutes, few seconds even, Glenmorangie started to go down because the air just took a lot of things out, and this one just started to open. So I knew that we did something okay if we can stand shoulder to shoulder with such a fabulous famous whiskey like Glenmorangie. So yeah, this is our stuff.
That's awesome, because I tasted all of these just a little bit before the stream, and the note that I wrote beside this was malt forward, similar to Glenmorangie. I was like, what the heck? That's crazy. But yeah, I think it is stylistically similar to what you would expect from a Highland. But I do think it has a lot more fruitiness at the palate that I'm used to from most Highlands, and that's from those wine casks, I believe.
I think it's even more from the bourbon cask. It starts from the new make. The new make is different. New make as itself at 73%. When we take it out, when we cut the heart, it's drinkable at 73% alcohol. Swear to God, it's drinkable. It's not because I'm an alcoholic, and it is very, very, very sweet as a new make.
Wow, I think 78%. So the highest proof thing I've tried is there's an Obtainium light whiskey that I have that's like 150 proof. So I think that sounds a little bit lower than what you're talking about. That's crazy. But yeah, I appreciate. But the thing is, coming from the bourbon world, which is kind of like how I got my start with this, I got kind of so used to extremely high proof cask strength releases. It wasn't until later I took a step back with like Scotch and learned to appreciate things in the 40 to 45, that range. And I appreciate them so much more now than I did originally. Because I was like, before I was like, what is this water? But now I'm like, this one's really, really beautiful at that proof.
Thank you. And again, it's the same thing for me when we're tasting from the cask, doing the blends. So of course we fill the cask at 64.5, and then because of our weather, it's always going to go up. And during the summer, the ABV goes down because you lose more alcohol because it's so humid in Tel Aviv, and during the winter we lose more water, so the ABV goes up. But all in all, it's going to go up. So eventually, I think when we empty the cask after 4 years or something like that, now we're getting more and more to 4 and up. We are going to get something like 67, 66.8 in the cask. So, and sometimes we can see that if we're sending samples to America and we ask them, they're picking a cask, and I asked Joshua, what's the ABV they want? Original one. Mostly it's original one. So it's, you like the strong stuff.
Yeah, but I think I've learned to, I guess, manage my expectation when it comes to world whiskey, because I think American whiskey is kind of the dominant one that is those like really high proof releases, at least in my experience. Zofer in the chat says Tal is saying all the stats we like: no chill filtering, decent ABV, and no added color. Yes, agreed. Those are all good things to hear. So I guess we're ready to move on to the next one. Which one are we doing next?
I think let's do the Elements Red Wine cask.
Yes. So this is the bottle for that one. By the way, I like the bottle design. It's super unique. What was kind of the inspiration behind these? I noticed like the box it ships in is also very like slim, so it definitely stands out on the shelf.
We were just looking, just checking out all kinds of bottles, and started with the design, and then we needed to actually produce our own bottles. We just really just like the feeling in the hand. It looks like a real whiskey bottle, and it was great to just to hold it and pour it. So I think, and now it's our shape and our design. So
right,
it
definitely stands out
because
yeah. So this one actually, I was talking to Sam a bit before this. He said this one is now available in Costco's across California. Is it just California that it's launched in, or is it available at Costco's at other states as well?
It's not this one, I think.
Yeah, it's not this one. The one he's referring to is actually this one here. This is the Elements Sherry cask.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so this is the one that you'll find in a host of Costco's right now, but the red wine is different.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, yeah, I see that now in his email. But they just recently, the sherry cask ended up in Costco's across California, MSRP of about $50. I have the list in the description in the comments for you guys. If you guys are in the area and you want to pick it up, those are the stores that should be getting it here soon if they don't already have it. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out for that one. But let's talk about this one. So this one is, you said it's a red wine cask.
Yeah, this one is a part of the Element series, which we have 3 whiskeys in that. Peated one, which is a very lightly peated sherry, like we talked about from the Costco, which is not a sherry bomb. It's kind of an old style sherry, very balanced, and the red wine, which is not going to be very winey. So if we have the one which is a table whiskey like the classic, then we were looking for 3 that everyone can find something he likes. And we did whiskeys that we actually like to drink. And I think that we don't like very winey whiskeys. So this was the hardest whiskey to make. And I think it's the most complex one because, of course, you have sherry crowd and you have peated crowds. But red wine, you need to make something that is not going to be overwhelming by the wine casks. The Element series is based on 50% is based on the same casks as the classic. That means ex-bourbon, STR, and a drop of a new oak or virgin oak. And then we add another element. So here you have 50% of red wine casks from wineries across Israel. So it's kosher wines. We are a kosher distillery. It's not very hard for us to be kosher because there's no whiskey production. No, there's no whiskey production during the Bible time. So there's not a lot of regulations. So it's different.
There we go.
But when we're using wine casks like sherry, like red wine or cognac, everything from grapes, those has to be kosher. But either way, we have like a 3,000-year-old wine culture, even older, and we have again different terroirs, different climate zones, and the wines are developing differently here. But I think when the time passes, we discover that we like Carignan as a grape variety, Carignan wine casks. More and more, it's a very Mediterranean one. So this is a maybe one step deeper than the classic, a little bit darker, and I guess you get some fruitiness here. And the finish is dry, almost like red wine cask, almost like a red wine.
Yeah, I've just been nosing it for a minute. I'm getting sort of like a candied apple, like not necessarily apple itself, but like the red candy shell that's on like candied apple. It smells very, very sweet. I'm excited to give it a try.
When Tal and the team first told us about the Elements range and what would be in it, this was the one that made me nervous the most because most whiskeys, malt whiskeys, when they're matured in red wine casks, they tend to taste like high octane red wine rather than a whiskey, right? The whiskiness kind of goes away. And in speaking with Tomer, because Tal, you had said it, this was very hard to do because Tomer had that same fear. But this doesn't taste like high octane red wine. You get the fruit, you get the dryness, but it doesn't taste like wine at all. It's still milk and honey.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a lot sweeter on the nose than on the palate. On the palate, I'm still getting the fruitiness, but there's almost like in the finish, I'm getting kind of like a minty kind of like sort of like a menthol bit on the finish.
The funny thing is that you get some oak notes, but it's like you're drinking a Rioja wine from Spain, or you get it's like a wine oak and not a whiskey oak, or kind of trying to describe it.
Yeah. Oh, that's to me, that's definitely my alley. Like I do like a good sherry bomb every now and then, like that is kind of dominated by those wines, but sometimes the subtleness is just as enjoyable. Proof wise, is this the same? I guess I have the bottle here.
Yeah,
46%.
Yeah.
So same as the other release.
Yeah, the core range is going to be that, and then when we go climb up to the Apex series, this is where we go a little bit crazy. I think that the first Apex we actually did was a white wine cask, a Chardonnay cask, and we stopped diluting it. The strength we like it, 61.2, and then we understood it's probably going to be too much for the regular crowd, but most of
bring
the
it on,
Apexes
bring
are
it
going
on. Well, I guess a good question is because I've never really done much researching into it, but what is the whiskey market in Israel? Like, are people like whiskey drinkers there? Are they more wine drinkers? Kind of like, what's the norm like for just in general?
So I think around 40% of the population is actually drinking. So if you talk about religious guys, the religious Jews, they are drinkers, but I don't think their wives are drinking. And of course, Muslims don't drink. So all in all, Israel is that the whiskey is growing all the time. We are a whiskey country, even though 8 months of the year is hot. It's too hot, but we are still whiskey drinkers. I think I'm not sure about the current situation, but usually, and I think the last few years, we were the number one per capita of Irish whiskey consumption.
Oh, really?
Because we drink it in chases like that, and but you should ever seen in your life people drinking cognac in chases only in Israel. So this is the way we drink. But so yeah, lots of beers because it's hot.
Definitely some highballs too, maybe.
No, this didn't catch yet. Gin tonic, yes, but highballs not yet. Beers, wines, of course. Yeah, we have a lot of wines here. We're drinking a lot of wines, but whiskey is going there, and I think the most evolving category is single malts. So yeah, and of course it's Tel Aviv, and then the rest of the country is a little bit different. But everywhere you see in Tel Aviv, you go into a bar, just a regular bar, you see more single malts than you can see in Scotland.
Wow. Well, I guess, even though you guys had like an unfortunate launch at the 2020, at least you guys kind of had the, I guess I don't know the best way to put it, but like the potential to, be, you guys are the biggest, you're the largest and the first, and you guys are, I've seen your products pop up on shelves all over Southern California in the past year or two. And I see it at, so many stores. I think people are really curious about trying other world whiskeys, like I kind of alluded to earlier. And I think it's such a unique experience and look into maybe, just a hint of, the culture. If you can't quite travel there, especially during the pandemic, you maybe get a little taste of, what it's like.
And yeah, I think that our size of distillery, we're not that big, but we have to put some liquid on lips. And during the pandemic, it was very hard for us because we travel a lot. We get the bottles, we let the people drink, and then when someone was sitting at home, and we all thought that the world is ending, the whole world thought, and your kids were home, and your wife were home, and everyone, and you needed to drink, so you go online. You didn't look for an Israeli whiskey. You looked for something you knew. And so it was very hard for us when the whole thing started. But I think we did one of the first online tasting ever. So we did everything very fast, like the vaccinations here. We did everything very fast. And now when we came back, it's amazing. And, been to whiskey shows, just flew to some countries. We just came back from London. We won Brand Innovators of the Year at the World Whiskey Awards.
Oh wow! Congratulations, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And we went out next door, had a pint, and instead of celebrating, we thought two things. One, why didn't we win the best whiskey in the world? Because we were nominated. And second thing was we are a brand. because they called us the brand innovators of the world. So after 2 years, we have whiskey. We are a brand, and for us, this was really, really crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But this whiskey, by the way, the red wine is a whiskey that you need to taste because, as I said, during the pandemic, we grew, and we are now selling in around 30 countries outside Israel. But we are still, people are going to drink the classic. And then, of course, if you like sherry, you buy sherry. If you like peated, you're going to buy peated. But red wine is the last one. And since September that we came back to travel and did some tasting, we see more and more that people can, if you tasted some whiskeys in your life, this is more complex whiskey. And all of a sudden you see, okay, we got something here. So this one is, is the one you need to taste to understand and not only talk about.
Oh yeah, it takes like all of the things that are great about the classic and like kind of adds on to it. Like it's not a totally different whiskey, but to me it's adding a bit more of that character from those casks, and I think that's really good. All right, are we
This
ready?
one's become my favorite in the group. The one that I feared the most ended up being my favorite of their standard line. So I agree with you, Tal. It's people may be hesitant, but once you taste it, you can't untaste it. You can't untaste how good it is.
Agreed. Yeah, it's definitely it stands out. I think, especially being not only is it the only time I've ever had Israeli whiskey on my channel, but it holds its own. I honestly think in a lineup I would prefer this over several scotches that I have in my collection. So that's really cool. So I'm excited for the next one because that's the apex one that we've been teasing a little. So this one is the Fortified wine cask, 60.4% ABV. So tell us a little bit about that. Is this like a limited release, or is this more of like also part of the core lineup?
So the Apex series is, of course. So we have the bread and butter, which is the core range. So now it's 4 whiskeys, the classic and the 3 elements. We might add another element if we have some more regular casks like STR or port. And then we add another series, which is the fun thing about being a craft distillery, and we call that the result of the never-ending coffee between Tomer and me. The never-ending coffee is we get up in the morning, we meet at the distillery. Usually Tomer gets 3 hours before me because he doesn't like the traffic, and we have our coffee, and then we started thinking about crazy stuff and starting to think about that. And we never finish the coffee. We go into the warehouse and try to pick some casks, and then, or just traveling to a winery, or just starting to call someone just to get some more crazy casks. So all of the experiments, the outside the box way of thinking for us is going to be in this series, which is going to be outside the core range. So Apex is going by batches, and even if you have another fortified wine Apex later on, it's probably not going to be the same cask. We're not going to try to balance it. We're going to let the cask work. So every crazy stuff we're doing is going into this series, like the Dead Sea cask. We're aging at the Dead Sea. Rum cask. I think the second edition was only 5 casks, 4 Jamaican rum cask and 1 from Havana. White wine. We had a fully matured Chardonnay cask, and we had cognac cask. We had everything. The pomegranate wine cask. Which one is that one? There's a pomegranate wine cask. Yeah, this is the most crazy one, I think. This one and the Dead Sea, because we have. We use we eat a lot of pomegranates, and it's a part of our culture. We have a pomegranate winery in the Upper Galilee, in the mountains, so we just taken their casks. So this was a crazy one as well. The one you're tasting, it's a kind of a port cask, but we don't call it port because it's from Israel. It's not from Portugal. But again, it's a different one because it's from local varieties, which are not the classical, Portuguese port varieties. And it's because it grows up on the mountains, it's kind of a flinty one. So you get some flintiness in it. It's not a peated barley.
Oh, really? I was actually about to ask you that because I was going to say this nose, like it kind of surprised me. It caught me off guard. To me, it's smoky. It's kind of a good bit smoky.
Yeah. So it comes from the wines, because the wines are it's a fortified sweet wine, so that means it's like 18 or 20% alcohol sweet wine that was just fortified and just stop the fermentation, so we have a lot of the fruit sugar inside the wine, and it was aged for like I think 3 years before we got it to the distillery. But again, something with this wine is a kind of it's something between a smoke or just a flint of the lighter or something like that, like mineral.
No, I was gonna almost say like this sounds like a bad note, but I don't mean in a bad way. It's almost like a garage, like a car shop kind of note, like motor oil. Does that make sense? Like, it's kind of what I'm getting on it.
I like just, that note.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a good note. I can see someone putting that on a bottle and be like, yeah, it tastes like motor oil.
Yeah.
But wow,
well, if you talk about burnt rubber on sherry, so we can do all of those. Just I would love to do all the real notes we think about the nut. The delicate but rich and all of that. It's going to be great. Motor oil, burnt rubber. Just think of.
Yeah, I mean, I think on palate, it's a little more toned down. To me, it still has a uniqueness. It almost, you mentioned you're using Jamaican rum casks for another project. This almost has that Jamaican rum funk for me. It's just, maybe that's just how I'm interpreting it, but it has this this kind of like really deep, rich funkiness that makes it super unique.
And I think we have some of those casks from this winery. We just had a single cask from that, and it's crazy. You can never know where those scents are coming from, and when those smells and tastes are coming from. But when you taste the wine, you can see that. And then we have another one, a ruby port, again fortified Israeli wine from the Lower Galilee, which is much more lactic and strawberries and stuff like that in a whiskey. The great thing about our climate and the strength of the alcohol that you can use exhausted cask from wineries. From them, they just finished with that. We can start, but it's the same thing with if we take in a cask from Scottish distilleries. So after 10, 12 years, or even 2 cycles that they use their cask and don't have anything to do with the cask, we just starting because the climate here just opens everything up, so we can actually source some of the unique notes back. So we can always try. This is the best playground.
Absolutely. I'm seeing some people in the chat saying they're very familiar with the brand. So Stacy says, love M&H, had a sample of it at the Belfast Whiskey Week last year.
Really? I didn't know we were there. So yeah.
And then David Goldman says, love all your releases. Well, except the peated, but personally, when I go peat, I want more in your face peat. Okay, yeah. I think they have something. I mean, just based on these 3 alone, they're so different from each other. I feel like you could find something you like in their lineup, no matter if you like the peat, you like the smoky, or if you like those like really fruit forward notes, like the elements that we had earlier.
And for David, I think that not every expression, because the expression for the ImpEx series, the biggest one we had was 4,500 bottles, but usually it's 4, 5, 6 casks, so it's around 1,000 to 2,000 bottles. So not every expression is coming to America, but if you like peated ones, we have some peated port, we have some peated STR, which is my favorite from the peated series. When we tasted it after blending, we said, okay, we kind of got something like a Kilchoman Seneg or an 18-year-old Talisker in 3 years. And we couldn't understand what happened there. So for David, I'll try to get you some peated sensation to America.
Yeah, definitely much appreciated. Well, speaking of which, I know we were planning, we're going to move to the gin here in a second, but my good friend Aaron over at the Neck Pour on Instagram gave me 2 samples. I'm only going to drink one of them here right now, but this is the Single Cask Nation 3-year-old peated release. Joshua, you said you still had this bottle around, right? So tell us a little bit. I mean, yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So, we consider ourselves very lucky in that not only are people like M&H, like Tal and Tomer at M&H business associates, but they're friends as well. And as the owner of Single Cask Nation, or one of the owners of Single Cask Nation, when we asked them if we could buy a cask, they didn't hesitate to say no, which we were very happy with. And I think to date we've bottled maybe 5 casks of M&H.
Oh wow!
And some 2-year-old and then this 3-year-old. And this one, the 3-year-old that you have, was unpeated spirit that was then matured in an ex-Isla cask. So you are going to get some peatiness coming through there.
Gotcha.
But it's all cask driven, and I can't remember. It may have been, well, I probably shouldn't give the distillery name. Let's just say it's an ex-Isla cask.
Okay.
But we did play around with the ABV a little, because I think we got this at around 65% alcohol, maybe 64. And it drank okay, but then we just played around with water a little bit, and we found that at 59.3, still really respectable. I have no idea what that equals to in proof. I'm terrible at multiplying. But at 59.3% alcohol, it took all of that fruit that we love about M&H and all of the oil, the texture, and took that to the fore, and the peat just kind of frames it in a really nice way. So that's why we went with this cask.
Oh yeah, I'm actually. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think that usually when you're using ex-Isla casks with non-peated barley, you get a lot of earthiness, very fresh, and grassiness, and some citric notes. And then when you taste it, you get there's a difference between the nose and the palate. And then when you taste it, you get some of the smoke and the maritime scents. So we actually in the classic and the ImpEx and when we are using ImpEx single casks or all kinds of ex-Isla casks, and especially at the Elements, we're using both of the techniques. We use peated barley in ex-bourbon and unpeated barley in ex-Isla. So you get a kind of a combination from the whole spectrum of notes.
And I've seen that done before. I mean, I just offhand, I know there's some rye whiskeys that do a similar thing with Isla casks. I know High West has done a few of those. Also, I just bought some Cuban rum. The was it Havana Club? They have a smoky one that's the same thing. They finished the rum in the Isla cask. That seems to be a very popular thing that I hadn't noticed until the past couple of years. But it does give it a unique twist. It's smoky, but not smoky like the other one was, like the Apex was. To me, it's more of a lighter smoke. It's definitely in the background. But then the whiskey itself is what's really showing off. Man, that proof is really good. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, cheers. And Tal, I really like what you said about the citrusy notes. I was still working on my Fortified red wine, so I had to finish that. But now I'm on this, and that citrus just really comes through with the peat, with that coastal sort of quality on the peat.
I think when we are tasting the ex-Isla casks, you can actually see the differences between the distilleries we get the casks from. Some of that are really, you can feel the citrusy, the freshness, and the other one is more lactic. It's more heavy. And it's beautiful to see the differences between those. And when we start and do a blind tasting, of course, it's going to be hard when you're doing all peated ones, because sometimes it's, you need to do a break and have a lager.
Right.
But then, you know us, we're always going to look for an excuse to have a lager. But when you do that, it's amazing to see the differences between twin cask, between same batches, just one cask laying next to the other, or in those 2 warehouses, 3 warehouses, just a few meters away, one from the other. It's beautiful. And because it takes everything back, the liquid just takes, oh yeah, there you go.
So just to your point, but extending it a little further, Tal. So these are 2 sister casks, and when these samples,
I can highlight you if you want to show.
Yeah, there you go. When these samples were pulled, they were sister casks. This one has been maturing in Tel Aviv, and it was maybe 7 months old at the time. And then this one that's much darker, sister cask, had been maturing at the Dead Sea, same age.
That's crazy.
Right?
Same age, and it's just that much of a difference from where it's aged.
100%. And so you can get that, like Tal was saying, in the distillery, casks next to each other. But then M&H sort of take it to not just the next level, but the next level after the next level after the next level, and mature whiskeys, in the lowest place on earth, to get this extreme maturation going on with their whiskeys.
Joshua, you know what we discovered? That if you taste the same whiskey, really, same whiskey, you take a classic, you taste it in Tel Aviv and you taste it at the Dead Sea, is different. It's like you taste something on the plane.
Well, so
Really?
because of the air
the
pressure.
elevation, yeah, that's really interesting because we actually in the chat there's someone here with a YouTube channel. Her name is Whiskey Mountains, and what she does is she compares whiskey to like trying it inside her house and then when she's on a hike. So she notices there's a huge difference sometimes. Sometimes she'll love something having it at home and then take it out on a hike and she's like, "What is this? I don't like it." It's just really cool to hear that. And she actually just chimed in. She said that's so cool. It would be so neat to try those totally different altitudes next to each other. Yeah, so that's awesome. That's crazy difference.
You know, the most of the problems is when you go into a winery and you taste the wines at the winery, then you buy some bottles, you go back home and you can't even drink the wine because the winery makes it taste much better. You know that? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was different. I don't know why we did it, why we brought a bottle of classic to the Dead Sea, you know, there in the hotel just next to the lobby. We just had, it was totally different. It was much more, you know, sweet, much more spicier, and because of the air pressure. Yeah.
So strange.
Yeah, it is.
That's so awesome. David, he was mentioning as we're talking about climate, he said any plans to create a bourbon style whiskey. I'm guessing climate wise, it would be similar to Garrison Brothers in Texas. Well, I think it's kind of the point you were touching on, like the lower altitude really changes the air pressure. I mean, would you guys do something like that with the Apex series, like maybe something more bourbon-esque?
So we don't distill anything else from barley. So if we want to do a bourbon, we can. If you taste a single bourbon cask from us, it's going to be a little bit bourbony, but not as bourbon. And if we're using, you know, new oak like the bourbon industry, with our heat is going to be sometimes like black, almost, you know.
It'll be like
soy sauce.
some Texas whiskeys go overboard with that.
Yeah, so we don't like it. We never say no. So let's see. Maybe we'll start using some corn, and we'll see. We had some experiment with rye. We had some experiment with rye, but it's 1 or 2 casks. It's very hard for us with our machinery to work with rye because it's kind of muddy. And
I've always heard rye is
it's
one of the most difficult grains to work with.
Yeah. But very interesting ex-rye casks. So yeah, we have to wait for those.
That's awesome.
Especially those that were aged at the Dead Sea. 112 liters, I think we have. Small, small like water cask from rye. Beautiful casks.
Wow, man, that's so exciting. So I was actually browsing on your YouTube page, and I saw you were like literally standing in the Dead Sea doing an interview or something one time.
Oh, yeah.
I think you were doing a tasting there. That was so cool.
It was, the marketing made us do it. It was 50 degrees or something like that.
Oh, no. Well, it's a great video. I just saw the thumbnail. I'm like, wait, where are they? And I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Yes, and it's not snow. It's all salt. Yeah, we were actually standing on salt.
Oh, my gosh. That's so awesome. It's definitely one of the places I want to visit at some point in my life. Well, we only have a few minutes left, but I did want to get into this gin because I thought it had a really interesting story. So can you tell us a little bit about the Levantine gin?
Yeah, so this is the Levantine gin. Again, we started off and looked for a little bit of cash flow, but not only that. I think that you have to understand that we are all a mix. We call Israel the melting pot, and it's, first of all, it's Middle East, Mediterranean and Middle Eastern all together. So food and culture is a mix. And then it's us that we came from all over the world. My wife's father came from Iraq, and her mother's from Berlin, and my father from Ukraine, and my mother's from Bulgaria. So just think about dinner.
Oh, man. Sounds like a treat. You experience all the different cultures at once.
And so it is a mix of everything. And when we decided to make this gin, we decided first of all to make it from single malt. So it's the same new make. It's a single malt gin. So it's the same new make. And then, of course, we needed juniper to call it gin. But all the rest is something you're gonna open every Israeli's kitchen. The kitchen cupboard, and you can see all those spices inside. So it's, of course, lemon verbena, which we use in tea. You have black pepper, which we use a lot. We like spicy stuff. You have some cinnamon, you have chamomile, and you have oranges. You know, we're from Jaffa, Tel Aviv, and lemon peels. Everything, you know, we have lots of orchards around. And the signature, which is zatar. And zatar is a kind of a wild herb that grows out on the mountains, and it's called hyssop, I think, but it's not really this one. It's something kind of a very spicy wild oregano, um, and we use this as well. So after the second distillation, we take the spirit into a very little alembic, a 250 liters pot still, and soak the herbs inside, macerate the botanicals inside for 48 hours. And then we had this strainer, like a carter head, up on the heads with lemon peels and fresh za'atar, and we distill it again. So if you're talking about high ABV, when the gin is just going out from the little condenser, it's around 80% alcohol. That means 160 proof or something like that. So this is the highest ABV we get, or even a little bit more. And then we add some just a little bit of new make with no botanicals, just to open it a little bit, and then we take it down to 46. So it's a kind of a sipping gin, but in a nutshell, this is the Israeli cuisine, which is actually booming all over the world at the moment. Lots of Israeli restaurants. Everyone is eating shakshuka, which is something my kids are making for dinner. And this is I have a good friend that just won his first Michelin star in Chicago for an Israeli restaurant called Galit. So you can see Israeli restaurants all over. It's because of this mix. It's because of this mix, and it's because of those tastes. And I guess you can find it in this glass. So, cheers.
Yeah, cheers. The nose of this is so different than any other gin I've ever tried. I'm getting like a bit of like cayenne or like some kind of like paprika kind of. The reason I say that is because this is going to sound like a weird comparison, but Arby's came out with a vodka like last year. Did you guys hear about that?
I did. I thought that was an April Fool's joke, but
no,
it wasn't.
I was the fool because I bought it. Okay, but I did buy it. But they had one that was supposed to be curly fry flavor, and it was infused with things like I actually looked it up while we were saying that it's infused and distilled with cayenne, paprika, onion, and garlic. And this nose is very similar to that one. Of course, it tastes a lot better than Arby's vodka, but it's just so interesting that those notes that you would never pick up on any other gin are so dominant and present here. I think it smells delicious.
You should really, as you're sipping it, really pay attention to the texture on it. One of the things that I think about with gin is, 95% of them are made from neutral grain spirit and then diluted to 40% alcohol, chill filtered. So they're taking out all of the oils. This is 46%. And it's coming from their new make, then macerated with the botanicals and then distilled once again. And so you're still getting all of that great texture that the whiskey had, but in the gin. And I think that in and of itself is kind of remarkable. And that's
I just had my first like taste of it. Like you said, the mouthfeel is just so it drinks like a whiskey in terms of like how you don't get that often with gin. The only gins I've had something similar to that is kind of similar when they use like a rye grain, like a American whiskey distillery makes their gin out of a rye. This is very similar to that experience, that mouthfeel experience, and I think that makes it a sipping gin. I mean, I think the flavors mesh so well. It's not super overly juniper, which is good in my book. I'm not a huge juniper fan, but like you said, legally juniper has to be there. So, but I think, man, this is honestly one of the. I mean, I don't sip gin often, but this is delicious.
We like it as a martini more than a gin and tonic. Of course, it's nice as gin and tonic, or with ginger ale, because it's more like it's kind of halfway to be a whiskey. But as a martini, it's great. We were sitting in Tomer's laboratory with Joshua a few years ago, just tasting from a cask. You remember that? We were picking.
He rolled the cask right into the tasting room. It was fantastic.
That's awesome.
Because the tasting room was air conditioned and outside was 45, 50 degrees. So yeah, we were just sitting there and having some martinis. So as a martini is great because we need you to feel the taste. Even though if you put some tonic and ice inside, you're still gonna get the spiciness. You can feel it's not a regular gin. We also have two expressions which are not coming to America. One is aged one in STR cask for a few months, so you get the color, you get some more kind of a let's say you get more of the warm notes, kind of winter gin. And we just had another experience. We talked about ex-Isla casks. So we did a very small batch of this. Here we go, the peated one.
Wow. Whoa.
So
How is
yeah, we
that?
had.
How does that taste? That sounds so interesting.
So I ran out of my my regular gin. I could have gotten another bottle, but it was downstairs, and it's late for me, and I was lazy, so I said, you know what, screw it, I'll just pour some of the peated cask.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable. It's, you know, kind of like how we talked about the Isla cask kind of framing the fruitiness of the whiskey. This Isla cask is very delicate, and it just amplifies all of the botanicals going on it. And this is at 50% rather than 46%. And so it's just a great sipper. Like,
I was like, where do I get my hands on that? Is that available? Because that sounds so good. Like, I see people in the chat being like, wow, that sounds awesome.
I'll tell you the story with that. We wanted to make a special edition for the visitor center at the distillery. We have a little visitor center, and then there was no visitors because it was COVID time. So we had a few bottles. So I just took one home. I did a peated Negroni, which was amazing. So then Joshua told me, you know, you have to send me one. So I sent you one bottle, and then we started to work with, I think, Taiwan, and they said, send me every gin you have. So we sent everything there. We have another batch now. I think it was even a little bit more peated. I think so. I'm not sure, but so we have now just released a little bit. So it, again, it's in the visitor center or in China or in Taiwan. But yeah, I have a bottle for you. No worries, Cliff.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I'd love to like try it on the channel and do a review, because that's such. It sounds like it would work, because I know how that Isla cask impacted the, or no, we didn't use. Sorry, you didn't use the Isla cask. Oh no, it was the single cask. Yeah. Sorry, got confused for a second. But yeah, so it affected it so subtly, but also it like was really dynamic once you actually tasted it, and it kind of like complemented the flavors, like you said, versus overtook them.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
We actually preferred this gin with Isla cask. Then we did another experiment that doing the same gin with peated barley. Mm-hmm. So I told you we can. We just play all the time, and the one with the Isla cask was better. I think that's something, that combination between this grassiness and the some fruity notes and the, again, earthiness and with the herbal notes here and spiciness just goes together great. But this one, as our basic gin, or almost are the only gin we produce, and I think it's still, look at how many, the finish, you get some other, it develops, and you taste different herbs every time you sip it.
Yeah, on the finish,
now it's more cinnamon. Now it's more cinnamon for me.
Oh, really? So for me on the finish, I was getting a little bit more like a sweet lemon, like almost like limoncello, kind of a little bit of that essence of that just on the finish. I was just picking up a little bit of that. But wow, that's really an interesting. Yeah, everyone in the chat's like, I'm definitely gin curious. Yeah, everyone wants to hear about that. Well, that's awesome. I know we're about out of time. But is there anything you guys have coming up? I know we mentioned earlier that the sherry cask Elements is available at Costco's. For $50. I put the list of Southern California stores in the description. Is there anything else new coming either in either of your worlds, actually? I mean, it could be outside of Milk and Honey as well. Anything cool coming up soon that we should be excited for?
Now, from our side, the problem is the shipping time in the world, but there is another, the new batch of the Dead Sea and a new batch of fully matured whiskey and pomegranate wine cask. It's on its way to America, and some single casks. And I'm coming over actually to the East Coast in the end of this month. So I hope that until the end of this year, I can come and visit you guys at the West Coast. So this is from us, and we have some crazy plans and we just launched an IPA cask and some chocolate porter casks, and I don't know. We're playing.
I love that. I love the experimentation. That's so cool, and I love seeing new things. I think you'll definitely build a fan base, and they'll be willing to try whatever kind of cask you put it in. They're gonna definitely seek that out. That's very, very exciting. I'm so glad to hear that, and I'm looking forward to trying more expression. Maybe when you're out here on the West Coast, I'd love to have you on again for some new releases. What about you, Joshua? Anything cool happening in your world soon?
Well, I need to point out that Swan in the comments had the best comment there. East Coast, Best Coast.
I figured that's the one you were talking about.
As a Connecticut boy, yeah, everything that we tasted is obviously still on shelves. One thing we didn't get to taste that really has become a favorite of mine was the Apex Cognac cask, which is just a spicy little devil. I really, really like that whiskey. There are some other M&H things coming, but I'm not one to sort of let the cat out of the bag.
I gotcha.
And yeah, I like to tease, but then especially like Tal had said, he just mentioned it in passing, but it is like the biggest nightmare in the world. The global shipping situation,
gosh,
like the
yeah.
global supply situation, is such a nightmare. Like I'd love to tease a whiskey that's coming in October, but that could be mid 2023.
I was like, October, which year? 2023,
yeah,
24?
it's a bit of a nightmare. Things are getting tough between global shipping supplies and glass shortages and blah blah blah. This, that, and the other thing. So there's so much on the shelves right now between what's in M&H's portfolio and some of the others that we're doing with Pandaren. And I tease Single Cask Nation, but we're looking at October, November, December. And Jason, even though officially I'm like the CEO, he stifles me. I'm not allowed to tease things. He slaps my wrist. So
well, you know what? Maybe I'll have both of you on for a Single Cask Nation stream, maybe here soon. That'd be awesome.
It'd be lovely.
I've tried a lot of my friends are really into, before I even knew what Single Cask Nation was, my friends already had like pretty much everything you guys ever put out. They share it amongst themselves, and we go to meetups and we have them all the time. They're so delicious, especially when you guys do American whiskey. I mean, some of the wild turkey stuff you guys have done has just been phenomenal.
We do have some wild turkeys coming, a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old coming.
Ooh, a 12. Okay. Well, I mean, both sound really good, but I mean, I just had Russell's 13 recently, and oh my gosh, favorite Gorgeous. Wild turkey product I've had so far. So I will keep an eye out for those. Well, thank you guys both for being here. This was a ton of fun. I would love to have you guys on again in the future to try some more expressions. So like, there's a lot of stuff out there. But yeah, thank you again, Tal, for getting up so early and doing this with us. It's much appreciated from these guys and from me. And Joshua, I hope to have you on again soon. And both of you guys have a wonderful rest of your day / night, wherever you are in the world. But it's been great having you on. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks so much. Bye.